Hello and welcome. My name's James and I'm guessing you've come to this video because, shock horror, you want to learn how to string a tennis racket. You've come to the right place. So why are you here? Number one, you've broken a string. Oh my goodness. And you've probably done this plenty of times before. And what you've started to realize is that getting your racket strung by a professional stringer, while they do a magnificent job and good on them, it costs an awful lot of money, right? You've also probably looked online and found out that string itself is not that expensive. In fact, most of the money you pay to a stringer is for their time and effort, which is absolutely fair because stringing, frankly, is quite boring. It does take time. And if you don't have a stringing machine, it's fair that you pay someone to do it for you. However, if you've made a decision that actually, do you know what? I break strings a lot, or I want to make sure that my strings are always at peak performance, you may have said, I'm going to go and buy myself a stringing machine and start stringing myself. Fantastic news is, it is not difficult. And after a very short number of rackets, you can actually make your money back compared to what you would pay for a stringer. And the beautiful thing with these things, stringing machines, they hold their value really nicely. So even if you stop playing tennis or stringing, you can sell it. You're still going to end up quids in. Fantastic. Okay, so what things are you going to need? Firstly, of course, you've got your racket with a broken string. Wonderful. Next things you're going to need are, you're going to need some strings. So either you're going to buy it in a packet. This is probably what you're going to get first unless you absolutely know the string that you want to use. Once you know what string you want to use, you're going to buy a reel of string. Why? This has enough string for one racket. This holds enough string for about 16 rackets on it, and it's a much more economical way to buy string compared to buying 16 packets of this. Right, so you've got your string, and we'll be talking about things like, how do I make sure I cut the right length of string? How do I make sure that if I'm using a reel, I don't cut too much? We'll be giving some tips on that. The next thing you're gonna need is one of these things, a stringing machine. What we've got behind us here is called a drop weight stringing machine. It literally means to tension the string, you drop a weight and it pulls the string. Other types of stringing machines you can have are crank machines, where you crank a handle back and it pulls the string to the tension, or you can have an electronic stringing machine. I'm willing to guess that if you're here, you've probably got one of these, a drop weight or a crank machine. Why? They're about 10 or 20% of the cost of an electronic stringing machine. This will be absolutely fine. Okay, so the stringing machine, what have we got? This part here, this is where our racket is going to go, just like that. The whole purpose of this jig is not just to hold the racket nicely so that I can string it. It's actually got a whole bunch of clamps on here, because when you string a racket, if you think about it, you're going to put what's called the main strings in first, the up and down strings. You're going to tension those. That's going to pull the racket, or want to pull the racket inwards and distort it. You need these clamps to stop the racket distorting as you string the racket. So it actually provides not just a place to put the racket, but also it stops the frame from distorting when you put all the tension on it. In the middle of the racket, you have clamps. This is how you're going to hold the string once you've tensioned it, so that it keeps that tension so you can move to the next string. And over here, again, whether you have a drop weight, whether you have a crank or an electronic machine, the principle basically is the string goes into the holder, and then in this case you would drop the weight to tension the string, and you basically repeat as you string the racket. Now, one thing I'm not going to talk about in this video is tensions in terms of how to select the tension that you want, because I assume that you already know the tension, probably because you've had a stringing job done before. But I'm also not going to talk about how to set the stringing tension on your stringing machine, simply because whether you've got a drop weight or a crank or an electronic machine, if you've got a stringer, then it's likely they've got a manufacturing booklet, or frankly, it's pretty straightforward. For instance, on a drop weight machine, if you unscrew the weight and move it, you'll have a gauge that tells you the different tensions. Further away gives greater tension, closer gives lesser. Equally, on a hand crank, there should be indications that you pull it to the desired tension, An electronic string machine, then again, you just type in the tension that you want it at. So that piece I'm not going to cover in detail because I assume you already know the tension you want, and frankly, you should be able to work that out from looking at your stringing machine where you need the weight, the crank, or dial in on an electronic machine. Let's be clear on some terminology. You probably already are, but just very, very quickly, we have a racket. This is mine. These strings going up and down are called the main strings. The strings going across are called the crosses, mains and crosses. And then the one other important thing to note is different rackets have different stringing patterns. Basically means how many mains and how many crosses. You might hear a 16 by 19 or an 18 by 20 or a 16 by 20. All it means is the first number is how many mains you have. This is a 16 by 19. I have 16 main strings. Then this has 19 cross strings. And really the only reason you need to know that is so that you can know how much string you're going to need. Now on that point, when you buy packets, these are typically either, and you should be able to see a number down here, they either come in 12 meters or 12.2 meter packets. That one packet is enough to string one racket. And the general rule is if you're just starting out at stringing and you don't know exactly how much string you need, so for example, for this racket, I know I need 5.7 meters of string to do my mains based on the tension I string them, and I need 5.1 meters for the crosses based on the string and the tension I do that. The reason why that's important is because when you buy a reel, if you're cutting off way too much and throwing it in the bin, you're literally losing out on maybe an additional racket that you could be stringing off of that. I'm going to show you some tips to make sure you can work out exactly how much you need to string. Okay, let's skip on, get the racket onto the stringer, measure our string, and let's get string in the racket.